for Mexico or for Canada. No, the tariffs, they're all set. They go into effect tomorrow.
We roll over as a country and just let them run over us, or we fight like hell, like we've never fought before. I'm taking option 2.
Welcome to GBS Deep Dive Investment House. So it's official now. Trump's tariffs on Mexico and Canada are going ahead. Canadians have said that they will now hit the United States with 25% tariffs on 30 Canadian dollars billion of US goods, and the threat of another 125 Canadian dollar billions more after a 21-day of consultation. Doug Ford, who is the Premier of the Ontario province, is saying he may actually cut the power and electricity that goes to New York State. China is promising countermeasures on agricultural products, and that would be very bad news for the farming states, many of whom are red. It's a disastrous policy. North Americans will be hit with higher prices, job cuts, and recession increasingly looks likely on the cards. At the same time, it's going to undermine United States' geopolitical influence over its close allies. The markets tanked. Dow Jones was down over 900 points at one point and ended the day down 1.5%. The S&P was down 1.75% and the Nasdaq was down over 2.5%. Both Canadians and Mexican currencies saw a huge sell-off when the news was announced. The Canadian dollar, which is also called the loonie for short, dropped as much as 0.5% to 1.453, and the Mexican peso slid close to 1% to 20.75. All Mexican exports to the United States are set to face a levy of 25% under the plans. Most Canadian exports will face 25% tariff as well, with energy products facing a lower 10% duty. And Chinese tariffs will go up by another 10% on top of last month's 10% to 20% now. Overall, on average, the Chinese goods are facing 33% right now. It's just not clear what the three countries were supposed to achieve within 1 month that would have stopped the tariffs altogether. Last-minute scrambling by Claudia Sheinbaum, the Mexican president, and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, or even arguments by the CEOs of the major American car companies, those that will be affected the most, made no difference to the Trump administration. All were left scratching their heads and thinking, what is it they want? There was absolutely no understanding what the administration wanted. According to President Trump, the countries have not still done enough to stop fentanyl or illegal migrants coming over the border. The Chinese, it said, have not even tried to reach out to Trump and ask him what he wants, as they are still figuring out what is the big picture and what Trump really wants. They don't believe it's about the fentanyl. Trump's pausing of the initial tariffs that were to be imposed on February the 5th was supposed to give the countries time to do something on both issues. A big push was made. The Mexican president, Claudia Sheinbaum, put 10,000 troops on the Mexico-USA border to stop migrants from reaching the United States and bust migrants to places very far from the border. Illegal migrants are now at historical record lows crossing the border, a fact that has been acknowledged by the president himself. And last week, Mexico sent to the United States nearly 30 top cartel operatives who were wanted by American authorities. It's one of the largest such handovers in the history of the drug war. Claudia Sheinbaum has also accepted intelligence from the CIA, drone flights to capture others, and she's unleashing a crackdown resulting in record seizures of the drug. After achieving all of this in such a short period of time, it makes no sense whatsoever for the United States to go ahead and impose these tariffs. Similarly, the Canadians have appointed a fentanyl czar. They've listed Mexican drug and criminal cartels as terrorist organizations as wanted by the Trump administration. Less than 1% of fentanyl actually enters the United States from Canada. Less than 1% of illegal immigration comes into the United States from Canada. And in the first time in Canadian history, all 13 premiers from its provinces visited the US capital together, illustrating how seriously a potential trade war was being viewed by Canada. And it's mad. Donald Trump was still not satisfied. So what does he want? Is Mexico being punished because it's seen as the backdoor to Chinese goods coming into the United States. How much will it hurt China? Is it time that Canadians and Mexicans reconsider their strategy of being the lapdogs for the United States? And what role do rare earth materials in Canada play in implementing Trump's strategy? I hope you will subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the content and turn on the bell so that you get the notification for when the new vlog is out. Generally, every Tuesday and Saturday is what I'm aiming for. So Mexico and Canada are in trouble. Mexico sends 80% of its exports to the United States and Canada sends around 78%. China, by comparison, sends only 14% to the USA. Mexico sends nearly 80% of the cars it produces to the United States alone, which amount to around 2.5 million vehicles that they produce each year. A unilateral 25% tariff on goods could destroy the Mexican GDP by almost 16%, according to Bloomberg economic statistics. And China, contrary to the allegations of having an export-led economy and relying on overcapacity to grow, has actually become increasingly less and less dependent on the United States and less reliant on trade overall. Over the past 2 decades, the country has steadily reduced the importance of trade to its economy as Beijing has ramped up its domestic production. Today, imports and exports account for only about 37% of China's GDP, compared to more than 60% in the early 2000s. However, President Trump's tariffs on Mexican goods is also meant to send a message to the Chinese and the Mexicans that his administration will not allow Chinese companies to use Mexico as a backdoor for tariff-free access to the United States market by reinventing themselves as Mexican companies. China is Mexico's second largest trading partner after the United States. And over the last 5 years, Chinese exports to Mexico have increased by an annualized rate of over 10.5%. In 2023, Mexico exported around $8 billion worth of goods to China, primarily minerals and machinery, while China exported $102 billion to Mexico, most of which are electronics and machinery, which results in a trade deficit between the two countries of $94 billion. This particular trade route has been described as the fastest growing trade route on the planet. And definitely, some if not much of the trade is due to the rerouting of what otherwise would have been a direct trade to the United States from China. However, Mexico had actively positioned itself as this alternative manufacturing hub to China, particularly in light of the United States tariffs on Chinese goods under the first Trump administration as well as the Biden administrations. During Trump's presidency, Mexico leveraged the USMCA agreement that it signed with the United States. The United States-Mexico-Canada agreement is a free trade agreement to attract companies looking to avoid tariffs on Chinese imports by relocating inside Mexico. Now, this has included, obviously, Chinese companies themselves as well, who wanted to avail the advantages of nearshoring to the United States. Now, one example of this is the Hofusan Industrial Park, which was set up specifically for Chinese companies, which describes itself as an ideal logistics hub for the North American market. And if you go on its website, the site also promotes itself as an alternative to exporting Chinese products to America. And it even writes on the website to avoid trade barriers as the reasons why Chinese capital should be invested in Mexico. Now, looking at China-Mexico trade, there is a clear jump in trade between 2020, when Trump imposed his tariffs, the first set of tariffs on China, and 2021. Now, the clear trade jumps from $60 billion in 2020 to $87 billion the next year. Mexicans are now in trouble. So the United States, which has the second largest trade deficit with Mexico after China, hence Trump's 25% tariffs. Now, this is why the Mexican president, Claudia, who Trump described as a wonderful woman after his last call with her in February, has tried to persuade the administration that Mexico will impose its own tariffs and restrictions on a wide range of Chinese imports, seeking to persuade Mr. Trump that Mexico and its low-cost industrial base can be a strategic partner to blunt China's economic sway in the country. Now, this is one strategy that Trump would definitely like and may decide as an acceptable bribery to reduce or even remove the Trumps that he has just imposed going forward. The proposed Mexican tariffs on China may target sectors such as the automobiles and the auto parts sector. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has already described Mexico's proposal as being very interesting, and he went on to encourage Canada to adopt similar measures.
I think one very interesting proposal that the Mexican government has made is perhaps matching the U.S. on our China tariffs. I think it would be a nice gesture if the Canadians did it also. So in a way, we could have Fortress North America from the flood of Chinese imports that's coming out of the most unbalanced economy in the history of modern times.
Now, Mexico already imposed a 35% tariff on Chinese apparel imports a while back, maybe in December sometime. And it's also been targeting Chinese online retailers like Shein and Temu, and implemented a 19% of tariffs on goods which have been imported through courier companies which originate from China. However, Mexico's actions will not come without consequences from China either. China FDI in Mexico has increased significantly over the past 5 years. The automobile industry has long been a major driver of Chinese direct investment in Mexico, and it accounts for around 1/3 of all Mexican investment done by China since the mid-2010s. But in the past few years, it's become the main driver of Chinese investment. In 2023, Chinese companies invested over $2.7 billion in the sector, accounting for around 72% of Chinese investments in Mexico that year. And this trend has continued until mid-2024, with automotive industry investment accounting for 3/4 of China's total investment in Mexico. So the Chinese are not going to take it lightly if the Mexicans impose tariffs just to please the Americans. The Canadians could potentially join in with the Mexicans to create the Fortress America that the Treasury Secretary Bessent talked about. It has a nice ring to it, and it's the kind of ring that President Trump would love to throw around as a slogan. But whether it makes sense is questionable. Canadians have been shocked and appalled by the comments from President Trump. The insulting way that the country has been described and treated, called on to become the United States' 51st state. Prime Minister Trudeau has been referred to as a governor snidely by Trump. The whole country was insulted by the President Trump's assertion that without US subsidies, Canada would actually cease to exist and is not viable as a country. So talk and then implementation of these unexpected tariffs from a neighbor who they used to see as their closest ally, with whom they share the world's most peaceful and longest border, has left them really angry and very bewildered. The majority of the Republican Party has also been left totally confused and very worried by this inclusion of Canada into the tariff structure. Attacking and undermining a close ally is not a good geopolitical strategy for the United States. Now, coming to the rare earth minerals. In an open mic moment in February last month, Prime Minister Trudeau told a group of business leaders in Canada, and I want to quote this, "I suggest that not only does the Trump administration know how many critical minerals we have, but that may even be why they keep talking about absorbing us and making us the 51st state," he said to have said. Now, there is serious thought being given that Trump is deliberately trying to destroy the Canadian economy and ultimately its sovereignty for the critical materials that they have. A 2022 United States Geological Survey estimated that Canada has over 15 million metric tons of rare earth oxides, And if these are fully developed, Canada could actually supply from 10 to 15% of all global demand. Now, we shouldn't be surprised that Trump would want Canada for this reason. After all, that's the reason why he's also saying to Greenland, I'm either going to buy you or I'm going to seize you with my military. So what options exist for the two North American countries? Well, in the short term, pain, given their historical integration into the North American trade model. But in the longer run, diversification is the solution. Henry Kissinger's widely cited sentiment, it may be dangerous to be America's enemy, but to be America's friend is fatal, resonates strongly in the current trade tensions between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Both Canada and Mexico have been long-standing allies of the United States. They're deeply integrated into the North American trade, previously through NAFTA and now through the USMCA. Both countries have relied on close U.S. trade relations for economic stability. Canada and Mexico built their economies around supporting the United States economy, and the assumption was that the United States would never treat them the way it treats China. Now, that assumption is breaking down. Tariffs show that even allies are subject to aggressive economic policies when it serves the United States' interests. Trump has imposed or threatened tariffs on both nations, treating them more like economic rivals than allies. Both countries have relied on close U.S. trade relations for their own development. But when Trump has just imposed 25% tariffs on them, it's exposed their vulnerability. By comparison, the United States has waged a tariff war against China since 2018. However, China was able to adapt using strategies like rerouting its exports through Mexico, has to change that strategy now, and investing in alternative markets. One of the biggest reasons why there's been a push with China with opening up Africa is to create these alternative markets. And China has ultimately been able to leverage itself because it is indispensable to a large way in the global supply chains. On the current tariffs, Chinese are promising retaliatory actions, especially on agricultural products that they buy. The US has exports of especially soybeans, one of their largest agricultural products that go to China, which accounts for approximately $22 billion. This is something that China retaliated on even during the first Trump administration. Oil and gas exported from the United States comes in second at around $19 billion, and US pharmaceuticals go to China around $15 billion. Now, Canada and Mexico have to reduce their dependency on the United States by strengthening trade relations with Europe, with South America, and China. Mexico's proposals to match United States tariffs on China is a defensive move, attempting to remain aligned with US policy. Canada is already retaliating with targeted tariffs on US goods, is pressurizing the swing state industries in the United States. The recent strong stance on the Ukrainian security guarantees is also done by Canada, in contrast to what the United States wanted, as a way to assert its own different sovereign position. Whether it will do so over the long term is another issue. Thank you for reaching this far. Please do share your comments below and subscribe to the channel and share the videos if you like them. Have a great day and see you on Saturday.